Now we have Professor Angus Dalgleish on the line, Foundation Chair in Oncology at the University of London since 1992, now Emeritus, Principal of the Institute for Cancer Vaccines and Immunotherapy, trained in general medicine in Australia and have served as a consultant virologist and immunologist in addition to oncology, did research degree and focused on the role of HIV and how it caused AIDS, discovered the CD4 as its principal receptor and how the virus causes disease by mimicking foreign HLA antigens. He was convinced that no HIV vaccine based on the envelope would work, but had all his applications based on the alternative selective conserved antigens turned down. In collaboration with Birger Sorensen, if I'm pronouncing it the right way, of Norway, he had developed a vaccine that actually works, but has been actively ignored by the Fauci and the Gates of Foundation. To date, his greatest impact has been the resurrection of thalidomide as an anti-autoimmune and cancer agent. This led to a 2-decade-long collaboration with Celgene, which led to the development of lenalidomide and pomalidomide, which have revolutionized the treatment of myeloma and lymphoma. Professor Angus Dalgleish, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
Okay, I have a little bit of a throat today, but I think it's due to being exposed to air conditioning and fans everywhere because it's been very hot.
Yes. The reason why I read out loud this amazing bio is because we never wanted to give the impression that we are anti-medication, that we are anti-vaccination. Medicine is amazing, but transparency is very, very important. I would like to delve deep today into turbo cancers. A lot of people are speaking about it. Some medical professionals are saying that this is a myth and turbo cancer doesn't exist. Your views about this?
Well, my views are very simple. It is that we are seeing cancers presenting at a later stage in younger people and which do not respond well to standard treatment. And that in trying to work out why this is, the only thing they've had in common is that these patients have usually been exposed to a booster COVID vaccine, messenger RNA vaccine, or even worse, the 4th or the 5th vaccine. And I think that the link is absolute. I have many colleagues who completely agree with this. They are told to be quiet when they mention it to hospital directors. I had one colleague who was alarmed that she'd seen, instead of 1 or 2 cancers of the cervix present a year, she found that she had about 11. And these patients had all been vaccinated with HPV vaccine, the cervical cancer vaccine. And yet, after being given the COVID vaccine, that they exploded with cancer of the cervix. She pointed this out as this is an urgent emergency, and the medical director suspended her, saying that she clearly needed a psychiatrist. This is the type of nothing to see here that's going on, which is just truly dreadful. And anyhow, I don't take anything at face value, and I get special secondary referrals, and I'll just give an example. In one afternoon, I saw 6 patients, which I rarely do see that many, but I'd been away in Australia for a month. And what was staggering, they all had turbo cancers. They all had started treatment. They'd all presented stage 4. They're all aggressive. And the only thing they had in common was they'd all had a vaccine booster. I was probably the nth doctor to have seen these people. They'd been to their GP several times. They'd been referred for investigations to surgeon, to their oncologist. They were on chemotherapy. I was the only doctor that asked them their vaccine history. Now, when I was taught to be a physician, you took all the history. You took family history, a recent history, past history, everything, to see whether it shows light on the diagnosis and the management. So this is exactly what is going on. The doctors are not asking, and therefore they're saying this is what they say, there's no evidence that these cancers are associated with the vaccine. Well, the reason is they don't ask, and they're deliberately not asking about it.
I find it hard to believe, because being a medical professional, the first thing that comes to your mind is that science is alive. And this research is being documented as we go along. So how can you say that there's no evidence when evidence keeps writing itself as time goes by? I find it hard that a medical professional cuts you off straight and plain like that, you know?
But they've been doing it all along. You've had Andrew Brigden on, who was only really MP in the UK with the real moral fibre to stand up and say this is a real problem. And, for doing this, the right thing, he was shunned by all his colleagues, he was ejected from the party, and he lost his seat. And everything he pointed out has all been shown to be completely true. And I think it's very sad what's going on in the world. I mean, I've had many instances where I've been told, literally been phoned up and told, I must be mad, shut up, this is nonsense. And one of our senior colleagues phoned me up and said, look, these vaccines are perfectly safe and effective. It says so in the Lancet. This is the level of scientific interpretation, curiosity and ability that we've been reduced to when people will quote a Lancet paper which is planted there by, I believe, Big Pharma, signed by lots of people, and is taken as gospel. Fauci did the same thing with the origins of the virus. He got these people to write a paper that it definitely did not come from the laboratory. They all got massive grants afterwards. The paper was published very quickly. I pulled holes in it all the way through it. Nature said it was not in the public interest for me to criticise it. Fauci used that paper to convince everybody that the virus was natural, and we had to proceed with everything, particularly the vaccine programme.
Professor Angus, I remember that particular report. It listed 25 medical experts in the US. And when I actually went into detail on each one of those medical experts that said it definitely came from this bat in this wet market, every single one that I went into were all on considerable payments in all the top universities like Yale and Harvard and Berkeley, all on 300, 400 million, 50 million, each single one. Why was that information, number one, not put on the document from the medical experts? We need to be fully transparent as to who's paying for what here. And clearly these people were paid to say what they said. So moving on from the lab leak, because we all know, it was obviously a lab leak, or there's many theories, but it certainly didn't come from some bat in Wuhan. I would be very interested. You were very critical of the UK during lockdown. You very much looked at Sweden for the model, not using lockdowns. You were very against the masks. You were very against everything, effectively, that the UK government was doing. If you were back again, would you do this? And what would you advise global healthcare workers all around the world if we have, God forbid, another pandemic? What would you suggest?
Well, first of all, I think that while people are members of the WHO, and here I admire Trump for pulling out of the WHO, you are going to have more pandemics. It's basically been hijacked by the elite and Big Pharma and all the organisations that they have hijacked the United Nations and the WHO, and they're doing it for they can control. I mean, it is Orwellian control, and so they've set up all these factories so they can roll out so-called vaccines for all the future emergencies. And we know now, in retrospect, COVID was long planned. I mean, this was no accident. And, I collaborated with Stephen Key and Paolo Bernard in a book called The Origin of the Virus. and where we showed that it was 100% came from the lab. It would never have ever have caused any problems if it hadn't have come from the lab, I believe. And this led us to look back. I don't think there's been any pandemic that didn't involve human meddling or incompetence, and that they use this to try and justify vaccines. Well, one of the things I did, apart from show that the virus was so supercharged with inserts it couldn't possibly be natural, and I mean that's now accepted, and Stephen Key's analysis goes along with that. But the other thing we did was show that it's impossible to make an effective vaccine for a coronavirus. A coronavirus has a wave of about 3 months. Warp speed vaccines with their so-called messenger RNA technology, etc., take 6 to 7 months. So by the time they get the vaccine, the virus is gone. But it's worse than that, because when you immunize somebody with that vaccine against the first virus, the immune system will only see that. So you basically cloud out the ability to see variants. I mean, that is the worse than the vaccine. You're actually making the body less able to deal with new variants. And of course, this is what we started to see, that people who were being vaccinated were more likely to go down with the next variant of COVID than those people who hadn't been vaccinated. And what was the universal response was, but if they hadn't have been vaccinated, they could have got really ill and possibly died with this new variant. So it's a very good thing. We must keep up the vaccine program. This is just unbelievable. It's the immunology terms, antigenic sin and immunological imprinting, which means that that vaccine makes the immune system fully primed only to see a virus that doesn't exist. And it uses so much energy doing this, it cannot see the variants coming in from the back, etc. And that led me to say, at the time when they said the Omicron was another disaster, I mean, our own medical officer and chief scientific officer, I do believe, are guilty of supreme incompetence and, if not, manipulation against the better interests of the country, because they poo-pooed it. They made out the South Africans who discovered it were not proper doctors. It was disgusting the way they dealt with it. To me, it was obvious Omicron was the very best vaccine ever. I mean, it was an airborne thing that was very infectious, gave an immune response, it didn't kill you, and it didn't even make you ill in the majority of cases. Yet they couldn't see this. They used this, but must have more vaccine boosters for everybody to protect them. All the while, and you know the Cleveland data, all the while, the more vaccine jabs you have, the more likely you are to go down with COVID or another infection. It was just unbelievable. Why didn't they stop this at the time? And we now know there was never any data that it prevented transmission. And I believe that there was never any data that COVID was that serious. I mean, the death rate was minimal, and it was in people who would have died from the next seasonal flu little epidemic we had every year. And yet it was exaggerated beyond all belief for political purposes. And we're all paying the price for that now. They destroyed education. They destroyed lots of industry and work. People aren't working in the millions in this country because they claim to have mental issues due to the lockdown and everything like that. And our economy's collapsed. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And we predicted this, that this would be the very minimum if you locked down, that would happen. And you couldn't possibly justify it. Angus Dalgleish, who was the guy we should have had in the UK, basically, he stood up to all his critics. 2,000 people wrote from the academies in Sweden to say he was a lunatic and he should be fired and not listened to. This is what we're dealing with. The quality of science applied to this country, and unfortunately across all the major economies in the world, was absolutely appalling. Angus Dalgleish applied basic scientific principles. It's an airborne virus. You don't treat that with a lockdown. You either do quarantine at source, or basically you do personal avoidance, which is what I argue we should do. And on the media, where they had phone in, I was harangued as a granny murderer for wanting to ban lockdown. I mean, this is the illogical nonsense that people resort to, and I think was fed deliberately by the government